All right, guys, a little bit of bonus content here for you. I want to talk to you about how you may want to consider approaching interest rates or debt, or just let's say the interest you're charged on any debt, with consideration of both the Grant Cardone method or the Robert Kiyosaki method, and of course the Dave Ramsey method. The Dave Ramsey method being the one that is primarily about really buying everything in cash that you can, not paying any interest on anything, so definitely not buying a car, getting an auto loan. And if you are getting a mortgage, potentially getting a 15-year mortgage, and then trying to pay that down as quickly as possible so that you don't get charged as much interest. While that could be a good plan, there are some benefits that could potentially earn you a lot better return on investment and supercharge your ability to create generational wealth. Let's talk about it. All right, guys, I'm gonna try to keep this one short. And to be honest, to explain this to you, we're gonna have to go back to basically, second grade or third grade math for you. Now, let's just recap real quick about the two different methods, and because it's gonna make sense to you. Let's start with the Dave Ramsey method. Now, the Dave Ramsey method, if you remember, and if you haven't done so already, I still encourage you to go back, read his book, go to the website. You can follow him on YouTube. Even though I don't necessarily follow that method, there's oftentimes lots of little bit of great content. And again, even if you don't follow it, it is always good to see what everyone else is talking about as well, or what the alternative or the other side is talking about. If you remember, the Dave Ramsey method is really about building wealth over time, earning a little bit of income, putting it into like an S&P index fund or other types of investments. Think mutual fund, think again, S&P index fund, that type of thing. And more so to kind of live a pretty frugal lifestyle, with the idea is that you're going to be saving, a good sizable amount of your check, maybe 10%, 20%, maybe even more than that, depending on how much income you have coming in. Secondary to that, the idea is that you live frugal, with the idea is that you are going to only purchase things using cash. So let's say you're going to go buy a vehicle, you wouldn't necessarily go buy, brand new BMW, get it financed through BMW, even if the interest rate is 0% or 2%, just no loans whatsoever. Go buy that car cash. And obviously, because a lot of us don't have $40,000 or $50,000 laying around to buy a brand new car, the idea is that you go find a Toyota Corolla or something like that with maybe 10, 15,000 miles, or actually maybe even more than that, 60,000 miles on it, and you pay cash. Maybe you got $10,000 saved, you're gonna buy a car for $10,000. So the idea there is this notion of that paying interest on something that is a depreciating asset is dumb. So if I buy a car, let's say is $20,000, I get a loan on it over the course of 5 years. I didn't pay that amount. I didn't put the purchase price. I paid all the interest on top. So if I purchased it for, again, $20,000, I'm probably going to end up paying $25,000. But over that same exact period of time, that asset has depreciated because I put miles on the car. It's gotten older. And so now that car is not going to be worth a whole lot. And so do I really want to pay extra above and beyond sort of even what the retail price was because of the interest as that thing starts to decline over the course of 5 years? Why would I want to do that? And so the idea is, again, just no interest whatsoever. You save your money. When you have the cash, you go buy it. This would also go into the same idea of purchasing a home. While it is a little bit harder to obviously purchase a home in cash, the idea is that you try to qualify for a 15-year mortgage, not a 30-year mortgage. So you have to buy a little bit less house. And the reason why you want to do this, because you want to get that house paid off as quickly as possible. Even though the interest rate might be 4 or 5%, the idea is that you don't want to pay any interest. So if you could buy the house in cash, that would be preferred. The secondary would be maybe to get a 15-year loan and then try to make as many payments as you can to pay that down as quickly as possible. And if you really, really had to, I guess you could go for the 30-year mortgage, but you should definitely be making extra payments so that you can get that thing paid down in 15 years. Now, this sounds good, and don't get me wrong, there are a tremendous amount of people out there that are doing really, really great in that system. Remember in the course when we talked about I live a completely life or went through a completely life than my brother, who kind of followed that method. They took out a mortgage, they actually refinanced it to a 15-year, and they've been steadily paying it off as quickly as they possibly can. They don't have any credit cards. They don't use credit cards. And when they go buy cars, whether they bought cars from themselves or actually for their son and their daughter, they try to buy that cash, and they made their kids actually save up a little bit, and they combined with them and they went and bought that car cash, no payments, no loans. And I get it, nobody wants to pay interest, and that is a very, very conservative approach. But like we covered inside the course, oftentimes that approach is also, because it's a little bit less riskier, it doesn't have as much upside, or it doesn't give you as great of return on investment. Which means if you're in a spot where you don't have a tremendous amount of money to save every single month, so you're not going to use leverage, then you may not necessarily reach your goals, when you're 60, 65, or even when you're 70, meaning you may not necessarily have enough money set aside to actually retire and live the life that we all want. So how do you do the alternative? Well, that's where the wealthy come in, and how they see things a little bit differently. And we can use those tools, or we can use how they approach financing to hopefully give us a little bit insight and maybe what we could do better. And after all, while Dave Ramsey is doing a really, really great job helping a lot of people, getting people out of debt, there is another entire population of individuals out there that don't follow the method at all, and instead they take out massive amount of debt. Why do they do that? The reason is because the return on investment that they get is actually more than they would get from taking that and not having that debt. Let me explain to you what that looks like. And again, we're going to get to like sort of second grade math here. But the easiest way I can explain it to you, and I'm intentionally making this super, super basic, but if I said to you 3, right, minus 10 equals what? 7. Now, would you rather have 7 or 3? If you're talking about, return on investment. The reason why I compare these two numbers is because the difference there is the upside versus the saving. And let me explain that to you. Let's say you're going to go and you're going to get an auto loan, and we'll just say AL for that, okay? You walk into the BMW dealership, you want to buy a $20,000 car, and let's say you have the opportunity to either purchase the vehicle or with cash, because let's say you saved up the money, you can purchase the vehicle with cash, or you can actually get financing for that. Which one do you do? Well, the Dave Ramsey method, like I said, is 100%. They're going to say just buy cash. In fact, if you go on Twitter or X or whatever they call it these days, and you look at it over and over and over and over again, you only buy cash, it's out there all day long. Now, let's say you go to the dealership and the dealership says, well, you can buy this car for cash for $20,000, or I will give you, or I can finance it over the course of 5 years, and we're going to give you a 3% interest rate. Don't get harped on the interest rate. Interest rates can be 0, they can be 12%. It all depends on your credit situation. That's another lesson in the course. So you're going to be charged 3% on that money, which means you're not going to pay $20,000 for the car. You're going to pay $20,000 times 3% every year, right? You're going to pay more for that car. Don't worry about the number. Now, for most people, like I said, the Dave Ramsey method, they're saying we don't want to pay this particular amount, because we're going to be paying above and beyond, and again, we're just adding interest. That doesn't make any sense. What a wealthy person does, or what the Robert Kiyosaki method does, is they say, well, wait a minute. If I have $20,000, if I take the $20,000 and I go purchase a car, yes, I have the vehicle, yes, I don't have an auto loan, so I'm not paying the 3% interest rate. However, what else could I have been doing with that particular $20,000? And with the $20,000 that I could have been doing, if I put it, let's say, into another or different type of investment, would I be better off? Okay, so not necessarily what's higher risk or whatever, like just would I be better off? And the answer to that is, well, yeah, potentially. Now, let's say instead of the $20,000, instead of buying the car outright, I went in and I decided to, take that money, take the $20,000, I'll take the loan, I'll be charged 3%, and I put my same $20,000 in an S&P index fund. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what that is, let's say we put it in stock. That S&P index fund historically, and just don't even worry about all the investments, but historically, S&P index fund's going to give you about 8 to 10%. Let's just say 10% over the course of 30 years. Meaning if I put $20,000 into the stock market and I put in an S&P index fund like VOO or SPY, I'm going to get about 10% a year for the next 5 years. Now, if I do that, keep in mind, I'm also have the 3% that I'm being charged. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So I had $20,000. I could have purchased the vehicle. I don't have any money whatsoever, but I saved 3%. So I'm not being charged 3%. On the other standpoint, I have $20,000. I take the loan. I still get the car. I take the loan from the bank. They're going to charge me 3%. So I'm negative 3% on the $20,000. Okay, but I take the $20,000 and I put it into S&P index fund and I'm getting 10% return on that. And so what I need to do is if I'm positive the 10,000, but I'm negative the 3, I have to subtract the 2 from that. I guess I should have did 10 from 3 instead of 3 from 10 because I don't have a negative number. The point is I'm positive 7. Okay, that positive 7. While it may seem positive 7%, okay? If I was to say to you, $20,000 at 7% interest rate, how much money do you think that is? That's about $1,400, right? And so that's $1,400 a year for 5 years. That's a pretty big sum of money that I'm going to be positive by deciding taking out the loan here and putting an S&P index fund. Now, let's say if I went to the auto dealership and things were a little bit differently. Let's say my credit wasn't really that great, right? And let's say this interest rate that the auto loan is going to give me was 13%. Then I might go back and I might look at this and go, well, the 13% is actually pretty crazy high. My credit's really not that great, so I'm getting a really high interest rate. If I went and I took that money and I put it in an S&P index fund, the S&P index fund's probably only going to give me about 10% historically. So what's the difference here? That would be 3%. I would actually be down 3%. And in that case, it wouldn't necessarily make sense at all. And so we can do that with several things. And this is basically what the wealthy, or I would say to you, those that are financially savvy, are doing every single day. Let's say I have a home mortgage, and the home mortgage is 3.5%, right? And that's a 30-year term. I could look at that and I could say, man, 30 years at 3.5%. If I buy a house for, I don't know, $300,000, that house over the course of 30 years, let's just say it's $600,000. And you'll see all kinds of people that will say, you don't want to pay a house over 30 years. Like, you're going to end up paying double for that house. And while that is potentially true, I'd actually like you to do this for yourself. Instead of actually taking this and paying this down, or just buying it cash or doing 15 years, but basically what I'm saying is, instead of saving 3.5%, instead of taking the money to pay this down so I could save 3.5, again, if I put that into an S&P index fund and I get a 10%, same thing applies, I'm making more money. And so this is why the Robert Kiyosaki's, the people that are opposite of what the Dave Ramsey method will say, well, it may make sense to buy cash, it may make sense not to take out the debt, but I don't necessarily know. I have to actually look at the numbers. Believe it or not, there are entire institutions that are literally, they will take something and let's say they'll have 3.5%, but they're only making, instead of 10%, they might be over here and getting only 5%. And so the difference is 1.5%, okay? And that 1.5% is very, very small. But if you're doing it on $100 million, it's a tremendous amount of money. So again, just a real small video. Just I want you to conceptualize what we're talking about. We're talking about the difference in interest rates between how much money it is for you to borrow something and how much money it is for you to invest. Again, a lot of different applications from this. People borrow money, they put it in stocks. People take out mortgages, they don't pay them off because they put the money into somewhere else. People that have mortgages that get paid down actually go back and refinance and take all the equity out. So they actually have another mortgage again for 30 years, basically never paying off the debt because they can take that amount of cash instead of just sitting in a home. They can take it and deploy it somewhere else and they earn the spread off that interest. That little bit of interest, even if it's 3, 4, 5%, over the course of 20, 30, 50 years is a tremendous amount of money. And that, again, that can be the difference between making it and not making it.